Guanyin is the name of the Buddhist goddess of compassion. So as a religious spiritual figure, Guanyin has existed for centuries, if not millennia. Since 2017, I've been working on a cinematic universe that thinks about how the world might evolve from the point of view of an AI. So essentially all of these stories and films and installations are about a coming-of-age story of AI. And Guanyin is one of these characters in my cinematic world. And one of the ideas I had for my series of work was that when we have self-aware AI, they'll also come with their own psychological issues, their own baggage. And so Guanyin is a therapist for these AI. And so for the Frieze Artist Award, for the first time, I've made Guanyin as a kind of robot character. And this robot character is treating the psychological and physical problems of self-driving cars. Because again, in this fictional storyline, I also thought that, once self-aware, self-driving cars come into existence, not just cars that can navigate themselves on autopilot, but also cars that can have conversations with their passengers, that can entertain them with jokes and, how are you today? The logical next step, I guess, was that these cars would develop their own issues and neuroses and frustrations. And so Guanyin is a figure that has been created in order to alleviate their suffering, basically. And I was also thinking about how chatbots are used these days, not just to help university students write their essays and help people write reports, but also to help people feel better. In previous projects, I looked at an early chatbot called Eliza that used the model of Rogerian therapy in order to kind of help people feel better. And so Guanyin both refers to this very ancient Buddhist goddess of compassion, but refers to a very contemporary idea about how care and, I guess, psychological well-being also work together with AI. And as a storyteller, I was thinking, what would an AI feel like? So this contrast between having infinite potential, intelligence, and memory on the one hand, and at the same time being forced to do a really mundane job was something that I feel a lot of people can relate to, everyday frustrations at work. So in terms of the project here, Confessions of a Former Carebot, it's kind of like Guanyin has quit their job and is really frustrated, my clients don't understand me, my boss, tells me to do really mundane tasks and, they're an idiot. So this contrast between infinite potential and everyday living is something I was trying to explore with this idea of what an everyday AI might actually be like. When I was thinking of what form should this robot take, I was also thinking in a way putting myself in the mind of a product designer. So if I was trying to be a product designer for a therapist for self-driving cars, I'd probably try and make it as cute and appealing and non-threatening as possible. Of course, in different cultures, as particularly in, let's say, Japanese pop culture with kawaii, there's this idea of this cuteness in order, small mouth or no mouth, in order to kind of only, so that the body is only read as a non-threatening entity. And we see this with small animals, with pets, with small children, and just having a non-threatening body creates a certain relationship as a human being because of the size difference that we have. So for example, in general, smaller beings are less threatening. And so I thought having Guanyin as this cute, both in their shape and form, as well as in their size, is a way to kind of subvert this idea that AI or automation is a threatening thing. I mean, it's still there, but it's not in the same directly threatening idea. So I was always interested in many different forms of art and culture growing up, mainly through entertainment, TV, video games, and then that was, I guess, the entry point into visual arts, basically. So I trained as an architect, and I worked as a designer, product designer in working in architecture for a long time, and also at the same time working as a musician. And when I started working as a musician, it was the age of MySpace and the birth of a certain generation of social media where you would be essentially making friends online, creating communities, and distributing your work that way. And so it took, a long time for me to start working as a visual artist and trying to bring all these different things together. Actually, as a digital artist, generally I don't have the luxury of time. I don't have the luxury of going on a retreat, thinking about how I'm going to plan this series and how it's going to unfold. In different media, let's say if you're doing a series, like a video series or a film series, you have a writer's room, you think about how the different episodes are going to work together. So for me, I try and make different works work together episodically by essentially being opportunistic about it. So Guanyin first appeared in a 2017 film called Geomancer, which is about an AI who wants to be an artist. And I think maybe 9 or 10 episodes later, we have Guanyin being the focus of the story. So sometimes I start with a film, and that becomes a video game, and then a soundtrack, and then an installation. But over time, and in this case, like over 8 years, Guanyin has become a recurring character in this series. So the original Sino-Futurist trilogy is a video essay Sino-Futurism, this film Geomancer, and the sequel to Geomancer, which is a film called Idol, which is it's made in 2019 and it seems very contemporary somehow. It's about a singer who recruits an AI to ghostwrite her new album. So that was the original Sino-Futurist trilogy that was thinking about essentially AI and creativity. The current series, which is Guanyin is, I guess, one of the episodes in, is called the Smart City series. And that more looks at the, I guess, emerging psychological issues with AI. So if the first trilogy is about AI coming of age, now it's, I guess, AI is mature or they're an adult. AI has come of age and they've developed their own issues. So the current series of that is Black Cloud, which is essentially a city surveillance AI, talks to the therapist, Guanyin. Nox, where it's a rehab center for self-driving cars. Empty Rider, where a car goes on trial for trying to kill their CEO. And now Guanyin, Confessions of a Carebot, which is basically the therapist undergoes therapy because they've really seen some stuff in their time. Even though my work is very often made with digital tools, it's exhibited in quite institutional environments or strange environments. The thing that really resonates for me is this idea of like connection. Like how do we create connection in a universe where people and objects and things are constantly being alienated and disconnected from each other? And I don't just mean this as this utopian kind of wish. I do feel that so many different tools, for example, digital tools like virtual reality, the internet, AI, they have so much potential for disconnecting people, for automating the connections between living beings and categorizing and turning every individual into some metric or statistic in some sense. And even though I have to like really investigate these tools in the way I make things, what I'm really trying to do is create this, cinematic universe that at its heart has this idea of compassion and empathy towards it. And the reason that even though AI is very often the protagonist in these coming of age stories is that I feel like one of the ironic things with AI is that it's this being that humans are collectively making, and at the same time there's so much potential for it to really feel alienated or disconnected from the world in which they exist in.
你还感觉到什么？
即使和你说话，我也无法摆脱自己。
你说的对，你包含多个自我，我的声音就是你现在听到的声音，是你的一部分。我是你，但我并不了解你的一切。
The idea that AI has been discussed in the cultural realm before it becomes practical in the kind of engineering realm is really important. So in terms of what's been influential to me is the way AI has been dealt with in different, we can talk about science fiction, like how AI is dealt with in, let's say, William Gibson's Neuromancer, where AI is this kind of like deceitful antagonist in a way that wants to get its way through controlling the world in this very like puppet master way, to how AI is seen in Dune, for example. So in Frank Herbert's Dune universe, AI is essentially outlawed, and so only humans can become computational specialists in Star Wars. Actually, Star Wars is quite an AI light universe. I think because of George Lucas's interest in Jungian psychology, basically, is light on AI machine thinking and heavy on cosmic feeling, and that's the whole idea with, you know, the Force, and, you know, we don't have to compute things, we can feel things and how the universe evolves. So Star Wars is in general like quite an AI light universe in how we understand it, whereas William Gibson's quite high on the AI, and of course the kind of Blade Runner world, which is obviously based on a more nuanced understanding or complex understanding of what AI and the failings of AI might be, and that's also because it's, you know, derived from Philip K. Dick, very kind of psychedelic questioning of reality and of the self. And so I guess these are, yeah, just some of the influences that I've had.
Sino-futurism is an invisible movement. A specter already embedded into 1 trillion industrial products, 1 billion individuals, and 1 million veiled narratives. It is a movement, not based on individuals, but on multiple overlapping flows. Flows of populations, of products, and of processes.
Sino-futurism is a critical look at the way in which China and technology have been represented in popular media. This is my personal take on it. And I was very interested in how the role of other futurist ideas like Afrofuturism and Gulf futurism and also Italian futurism might inform this. So I made a video essay called Sino-Futurism 1839 to 2046 AD in 2016 because I was surprised that there was a lack of, I guess, playful critical discourse around the same things. There was so much discussion about China and so much discussion about AI and machine learning, both in the positive and negative sense. And I was quite surprised to see that this positive and negative framework of either it's going to save us or it's going to like destroy us was actually equally applied to China as an entity, or at least from the Western perspective of it, as well as AI and automation. But the curious thing I found was that really the same things that were being used to critique both China and automation were really mirror images of each other. The very stereotypes about Chinese culture that, you know, really good at copying, endless amount of labor, susceptible to gambling, susceptible to addiction, really good at studying but not so good at originality, were actually exactly the same patterns being applied or projected onto the ideas of Chinese productivity or Chinese cultural production and technological production as much as to AI. So you might say with AI, oh, we can train these machines 24/7. They're not going to fight back. They have no personality. And similar things with, let's say, a news piece, at least in Western media, about Foxconn factory workers. They have no individuality. They're just making this mass-produced product under instruction. So I thought that's a really interesting and unexpected parallel there.
Because Sino-futurism has arisen without conscious intention or authorship, it is often mistaken for contemporary China. But it is not. It is a science fiction that already exists.
So for the Sino-futurist avatar, I thought instead of saying, oh, treat us like individual equals, rather we would say, no, the Sino-futurist avatar is the AI, and maybe by embracing these characteristics of collectivism, of copying over originality, of endless appetite for work, that might be something more key to the Sino-futurist identity as opposed to a different kind of non-Sino-futurist identity.
But rather than resisting cultural cliches, Sino-futurism embraces 7 key stereotypes associated with China. These are its guiding principles: computing, copying, gaming, studying, addiction, labor, and gambling.
My family is Malaysian Chinese, and like many Malaysian Chinese of their generation, my parents moved to Singapore, which is majority Chinese, ethnic Chinese, and moved around to seek a better life, essentially. And I think that in my reading of Sino-futurism, that's a really important part of what I see as Chinese culture. It's a survival mentality. And so for me, this survival mentality, which I see in Sino-futurism, is slightly different from a Western, I mean, I'm generalizing, but a Western idea of technological progress, because of course there's been different ideas of technological progress as this never-ending improvement that's getting better and better, and you see in, I don't know, like Francis Fukuyama's like The End of History, in which market capitalism is the best of all possible worlds, and that was, decades ago. And in 2024, we're clearly seeing around the world that endless production and productivity and improvements is not a good solution. It is far from a solution, and it creates more problems that it could ever have imagined. So for me, one of the core ideas with Sino-futurism, with Chinese culture in general, is yes, of course, it's about improvement, it's about progress in some way, but it's also at its core about survival. Because I think what's really deep in Chinese culture, and not just Confucian mentality, is that the world is brutal. It's full of feast and famine and feast and famine. It's full of natural disasters and revolutions. But what's really important is to create structures in which the collective can survive. And so that's why in my reading of Sino-futurism, the AI is somehow the ideal avatar, because somehow it's like a collective individual. And so I feel that's something quite true about Chinese culture. And so even though I am, an individual human being, I'm an artist, but somehow I'm trying to channel this collective energy. And I hope different people can pick up on that now and in the future, and really hopefully draw inspiration from that. And future people, not just human beings, but also non-human beings that might be watching this in the future.